Time doesn't erase murder, it just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching, but someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight we've got Bill Noguera with us. Bill, this is the second time that he's been on the show, and the reason why he's on the show is he got my attention on Instagram again, where he was telling a story about Richard Ramirez, who is a serial killer known as the Night Stalker. Richard was known to torture his victims, to include using an electrical probe to carve a pentagram in them. He's also been convicted of raping a 7 and 9-year-old child, as well as killing the elderly. So I hope there's not any sympathy towards Richard when you hear these stories. But Bill, I appreciate your time and welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure seeing you.
Let's get right into the story so people know what I'm talking about. Can you tell the story about the broom incident at the prison?
Yeah, so everybody knows that Richard Ramirez is convicted of murder, as you mentioned. But what people don't know is what happens in prison after the conviction, after he is sent to death row. And that's where I can give you some insights. There's Richard Ramirez, as most serial killers know, and most people know, are hunted on death row. When a serial killer comes there, he's immediately placed on protective custody unless he volunteers to go to a normal yard. And there is an instance that I'll speak about where Richard Ramirez was brutally assaulted on the yard because he was convinced that he should come out to the yard. But this is a few years after this, and Richard Ramirez goes to a lot of visits. He had a lot of groupies. And it always shocked me to kind of see the type of women that would come see this guy. And by all accounts, some of them were very beautiful, very young, and they're sitting out there, this creepy guy. And it's on one of those instances when he returns from the visiting. So let me lay it out for you. Death Row in East Block, which is the main housing unit, is 5 stories, and they're called tiers. And all of these tiers are, they have from 62 to 117. Those are the cells. So you have 54 cells in each tier. In the middle of each tier, there is a shower area where there are 2 showers. Between 1988 and 2023, I was the shower cleaner on death row on the 4th tier Bayside. And the guy that used to share those duties with me was a guy named Ghost. And I'm the one that got in that job because, well, you can imagine doing the shower every day for 54 guys. It's not the most pleasant job in the world, but it had its perks. I got to shower every single day, which is normally not what you get to do in prison. So that was something I did. So Richard Ramirez is at a visit. We don't know this. We're in the shower, we're cleaning it. And when we got done cleaning the showers, you normally stick the brooms out, these heavy wooden brooms that have about a 13-inch block brush at the end. And it weighs probably a good 2 pounds or pound and a half, plus the broomstick, which is a heavy oak handle. And we would stick them out of these tray slots. And these tray slots are used to cuff you because they never open the door on death row. Staff members and inmates are never together. So you have to stick your arms through the tray slot backwards. They cuff you, they unlock the shower, and then you're escorted out. But these tray slots are open. So we stuck the brooms out, and him and I are chit-chatting, bullshitting. He's a convict. He's an affiliated gang member. He and I get along fine. We're both convicts. And suddenly we hear a sound at the end of the tier. You can hear like the door open because it vibrates the entire tier bars. And we stick our mirrors out. We're thinking we're going to see the tier officer because it's shift change. It's right around 2 o'clock. So when the staff leaves, there is a grace period between when the new staff arrive and the old staff leave. So we stick our mirrors out, and what we see instead of a staff member, we see Richard Ramirez, and he's standing at the end of the tier. He has his hands cuffed behind his back. He has no escort because again, it's shift change. So they come in from visiting, they're dropped off at the front desk, and the front desk officer says, "Hey, go on upstairs and wait for your tier officer." So that's what he does. But instead of staying at the end of the tier, the door is open. So he starts moseying down the tier, headed towards his cell, which is 4110. As he's walking, Ghost tells me, "Hey, check this out." So when he gets to the shower, the tiers are only about 5 feet wide. So he has two choices. Either he steps over the broom to get past the shower, or he tries to walk around it, which is kind of difficult because the showers are a dirty place. Water is running off the tiers, so you don't want to get too close to the bars because you're gonna get this grime and mildew and everything on. Remember, this prison is over 175 years old. So he decides to step over the broom, and he does so. He gets the ghost's broom, he steps over it, takes one step, and now he has to stop again because my broom is also sticking out. So Ghost, when he takes that step and he barely passes his cell, he grabs his broom handle, he lifts it up, brings it all the way back, and swings it, cracking the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, right in the back of the head. It sounds like a watermelon breaks, and he pitches forward and lands right in front of my shower area. Look, this is the most hilarious thing in the world to me. Yeah, people are going to say, well, how could you do this as a human being? He was a child molester, rapist, murderer, okay? I didn't care. I let out a huge laugh, and this guy is laid out in front of the shower. There's water on his face because it's coming out of my shower because we normally just sweep the water off the tier and it looks like a cascade in front of the cell at the shower area. He's laid out. He's there for about 30 seconds, and suddenly he pops up, and he can't get up because he's cuffed behind his back. So he has to lean against the bars to try and prop himself up, and then he bolts down the tier, running, and he's saying in the craziest voice, "I've been assaulted." And it sounded crazy as hell. So he gets to the tier. The gunner now, who has come in for next shift, sees him and tells him to go downstairs. He sees the front desk officer. We don't know what's going on, but we can hear what's going on, the commotion. They put him in a holding cage, and about 5 minutes later, here comes a sergeant with three staff members, and they don't know what's going on. So they come to the shower and they ask Ghost and myself because they don't know what's going on. What's gone on here? And Ghost and his voice, he's a very distinctive voice, says, "Well, boss, I got an issue with child molesters and rapists and serial killers. So every chance I'm going to get to book one, I'm going to book his ass." And the sergeant looks over at me, and I'm just smiling. This stuff, you can't make this shit up. And I'm smiling, and he looks at me and he says, "Mr. Noguera," I said, "How you doing?" I said, "I'm straight," and I'm still smiling. So he looks at Ghost and he just says, "Nothing's happened here." He walks off the tier. So we fast forward to the next day. Ghost and I are in the shower again. We're cleaning the shower. And lo and behold, here comes Richard Ramirez from the hospital. He's got bandages on his head. He's all messed up. And we're looking at him in the mirror, just laughing. But this time, when he gets to the shower, he goes ahead and gets grimy, pushing up against the tier bars, because there are these bars that protect you from getting thrown off the tier. Because at San Quentin, many guys have been pitched off the tiers. Well, he's looking at both Ghost and I when he's walking by with this crazy look on his eye because he's afraid. He's scared of getting hit again. The cop behind him is just laughing. And that's the story about the broom and Richard Ramirez. It's one of those things that happen in prison that no one talks about, but I was there, eyewitnesses. There was a lot of stories about Richard Ramirez that I didn't witness, so I don't really talk about those. I talk about the ones that I sat there and watched whatever happened to him happen, and then I share them with the public so you guys can understand what happens in prison, and that an apex predator or a predator like Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker, who everybody was afraid of in prison, he's actually a victim.
Yeah, and that's what I found so ironic. I was going back and listening to interviews with Richard Ramirez and also some of the detectives that worked the case. And during that time, he created so much fear in the community, where law enforcement actually pleads to the public to make sure their doors are locked, if they've got a firearm to protect themselves. Because this guy would go so far as to, you know, rape and murder one victim and then go to the adjacent town and do the same thing. He was very relentless. And then when you hear him speak, he makes these really cliche and uh, almost cinematic speeches about how Satan is protecting him and all people are evil and plot, and makes him seem like this demonic god. And then you hear stories about this and you're like, oh, you know what? He's actually, just a guy with really bad teeth and who took advantage of the elderly and children. And now he's getting what he deserved.
Look, absolutely. Richard Ramirez and Night Stalker is about as unoriginal as they come. So let me give you a little bit of history on this. He is not the original Night Stalker.
Right.
D'Angelo, the Golden State Killer, is the original Night Stalker, but his name kind of fell off because he stopped killing. Richard Ramirez is a true character, but he was basically made up by the media. The filters they put on his pictures so his cheekbones look high, he looked like a rock star with the glasses on. They created a monster. He was a monster, but they made him look into like almost a godlike guy. He comes to death row where you have real convicts. And what I mean by that is that yes, Richard Ramirez is a predator, but he's a coward too, because when you come to prison, you meet guys who live by a code. They're killers. There is no doubt. And this is the reason that some law enforcement and convicts get along. Look, let me be completely candid with you here. I have a lot of relationship with law enforcement. And they usually, when someone walks in a room, they ask me, are you law enforcement? There is a kindred spirit between convict and cop. We're both conservatives for the most part. We see the world through a particular lens. And in prison, convicts believe that it's it may be wrong to kill someone and it may be unjustified, but there is a logical reason for doing it. Let me give you an example. Let's say, for example, you and I and Timmy over here are robbing a bank, and somebody grabs your gun and you happen to kill the person. It's absolutely wrong, should not be done. But a convict understands business is business. But Timmy over here during that robbery tells you, hey, buddy, hold my gun real quick. I'm going to go rape this woman. Immediately, you get the gun and you shoot him in the head because a convict believes that that guy just made his got on his crime into a perversion. It's the gratification, it's the perversion, it's the sexual element that it insults and it really pisses off a convict. So there is an unwritten rule. It's called the convict code. I'm actually writing a book about that. It's not a manuscript. It's not something they give you. It's something you learn over decades in prison. And you get it through something called clecha. In the Hispanic car, they lace you up. They tell you what you can and what you can't do. One of the things they tell you you must do is that if you get in any proximity of a rapist, child killer, molester, rapist, serial killer, kill him and kill him dead quickly. There's a perfect example of that with Dahmer, the Milwaukee cannibal. He, like most people, are told to go to protective custody. He didn't. He got on a work crew, and one of the workers, convict, killed him. It's that simple. This isn't made up stuff. People don't want to understand what really happens in prison. And Richard Ramirez was a victim in prison because everybody was trying to kill him. That's why he never came out of his cell, aside from going to church or to meet his buddies who are also serial killers, or to go to a visiting room. He went to yard twice, and both times he got booked.
Can you tell us about those times?
Yeah, absolutely. So Richard Ramirez came to death row, and as you know, the Hispanic community in Los Angeles were the ones that captured him. They beat his ass. They were trying to really kill him. Of course, those people weren't killers. They were just good citizens that wanted to take a predator off the streets who was terrorizing their neighborhood. He gets to prison, and the Hispanic car, which is the Southern Mexican car, in prison. They're looking for ways to get to this guy. So it's called a lullaby. So you kind of tell the guy, hey, every day you see him, hey, how you doing, man? Everything good? You need anything? And pretty soon he gets together. He doesn't have anything. So they send him shampoo. They send him some cookies. They send him some candy. In his case, they send him marijuana, some drugs, and right away his nose opens up. He feels these guys are trying to look out for him. They're just lullabying him. So after about a month of talking to him, he hasn't come out. They tell him, hey, come out with us, man. I mean, hey, we want to be with you. You're a celebrity. We love you. And they keep this up. Their whole mission was to get him to come outside so they can try and kill him. So it took about 2 months, and Richard finally decides he's going to go outside. I was there. He walks by my tier. I'm thinking, oh, shit, they're going to kill this guy. He goes outside, and I'm on the fourth tier. He got out very soon with the guys in the bottom tiers. Unfortunately, for the Hispanic car, they had two hitters for him. They had two guys that were going to come out, that did come out with knives because they were going to kill him. When he gets out, some guy named Rooster sees him. Rooster's a white guy, can't cross racial lines in prison, especially if the Hispanic car, the Mexican car, is saying, hands off, we're going to handle this because he's one of our people, meaning he's Mexican, not because they consider him. So Rooster sees him, walks up to him, and just explodes, starts punching, beating the crap out of him. Whistles are blown. I'm standing just a few feet from there. And of course, the gunner lowers his rifle, shoots a couple times. They take Ramirez off the yard. He's all bloodied up because he got beat to, like to a pulp. But now the Hispanic car is pissed. They they go to yard like a few days later and they pull up, the white guys. And they say, hey man, what the hell are you guys doing, man? We
Can you
had a plan.
explain real quick? Sorry to interrupt you, but can you explain real quick for the people that are listening that do not know what a car is?
Yeah. So in prison, your people are your car, and there's different cars. So it's if you're white or Hispanic, for me, for instance, the Hispanic car is the Mexican car, the Southern Mexican car. And that car, it basically, there's a lot of groups in the car, but when the Hispanics come together to go to war against somebody, it's a car. It's all of us together. Same thing with whites, blacks have it. So, California has the most gangs in the prison system, and they all belong to cars. They may be 18th Street, 24th Street, White Fence, whatever gang they're from. But when it comes to coming together, they all come together as a huge car. There are little cars or crews, but they come together as a car under one big umbrella, which is, in the case of Southern Mexicans, it's the Mexican Mafia. These are serious cats. So that's what it means to be in a car. Although I wasn't technically in any car, I'm Colombian, I'm Mexican. But at the end of the day, if there was a war, I rode with my people. It's just the way it is in prison. There's no way around it. I could be the toughest guy in the world, but I can't fight 2,000 guys. It's just not going to happen. So the Hispanic car at that time, which was the Southern Mexican car, they jam up the white car and they say, man, what the fuck are you doing, man? We had a plan, this idiot. And they knew they were in trouble because now they're going to go to war against each other because they screwed up. And they're like, what do you want? I mean, what can we do? Well, when Rooster comes back, we have another plan. You need to stab him. And we don't give a damn what he is to you. You stab him. You get him off the yard because we got a plan. Well, the plan was a diabolical plan. And so Rooster comes back like 40 days later from the hole. As soon as he gets out, the whites book him. And the Hispanics, the Mexican car, now they start talking to Richard. You see, we did that for you. You're one of us. We protect ours. They send him some more weed. They send him some more methamphetamines. They send him some more cookies. And about a month and a half later, this clown gets convinced that he's okay. And he comes out again. And this time, no one touched him, but two Hispanics, two Mexicans armed with knives went at him and they stabbed the hell out of him. It was so funny because every time they stabbed him, he would beep. You could hear it across the yard. And I know this sounds like I'm making fun of someone getting stabbed. Who cares? He's a serial killer, a child
Right.
molester. He's a guy that made victims of everyone. And now he was a victim. And you know what? I could give a damn. I laughed about it. I still laugh about it. And you know what? He never came outside again. He went to the hospital. He went back to 4110 and he never came out again. That's just one of the many stories that I could tell you about Richard Ramirez while he was there. But let me be completely clear. He was a victim in prison and he was scared.
Yeah, it's just funny because I could see some people having a problem with that story, but at the same time, they wouldn't have a problem with him being sentenced to an electric chair. So it's like,
Exactly.
you don't mind him being strapped down to a chair and have electricity run through him, but you do mind him being stabbed.
Yeah, I don't understand that. Look, I'm one of those guys, and again, I like being candid with people so they know who I am and what I am, so they don't listen and go, "Oh my God, I'm shocked." I'm a guy who believes it 100%. If you touch a child, if you rape someone, you should be taken in back of the courthouse and shot. It's that simple. There's no long process. There is an instant justice. Look, for whatever reason, justice is played out in prison. There's a very good logic behind it. These guys aren't just crazy guys. There is a code that exists there. And that code, like the thin blue line, is there for a reason. We make sure that we filter out the people who make us look worse. Now, people can say, look, Bill, you were convicted of killing someone. Absolutely. I take full responsibility for that, and I do what I can to make a living amends. Is it enough? I don't think so. And this is why I continue to do what I do. But I'm also a hardliner. I believe in a code, and you never rape, you never touch a child. It's just the way it is. There's another story in my book, Escape Artists, that I talk about, and that is that a kid came into the shower. And I call him a kid because of my age now. At the time, I was the youngest guy in all those tanks I was in. And this kid came in and he looked scared. But I thought that he probably had a knife. He was going to try and do me harm. So I'm taking a shower and I'm watching him. And he walks in, looks scared, and he sits down and I look at him, there's something off. But then I see another guy walk by, looks in the shower, and then points and tells his buddies, like, come here. The guy's an African American. Okay. You know, those racial lines can't be crossed. In this
Right.
instance, I crossed one because, as I said, there is no one that's going to be raped on my watch. And what I mean by that is if I see it happening, I'm not pulling out a phone and filming it so I can get better hits on YouTube or whatever the hell. I'm going to do something about it. It's who I am. I'm proactive. So when the guys came in, there was three black guys. They were gang members, and they looked at me and they said, and I quote, "Hey, Mad." They used to call me Mad. Uh, this don't deal with no Hispanics or Chicans. We're just dealing with this cracker right here. And I look at the kid, 18 years old at the most, blonde hair, blue eyed, probably there for DUI. He looks at me and he is scared. My response to Chili Red, because that was the guy's name, hey, your business is yours. Don't concern me. But I'm already making my way out of the shower. I'm putting on my boxers and I'm putting on my tennis shoes. He's standing in front of me, looking at me, and his partners have already surrounded the young kid. And I just kind of relaxed and I just smiled, and I could see when he relaxed. At that instant, I struck. I pounded him into the concrete. I broke his jaw. By that time, his buddies had jumped on me. I polished off the first one. And when I'm pounding this guy into the concrete, his buddy, and I still have it, I know you can see it, there's a scar that runs up my arm because he cut me with a razor blade. And I turned around and beat him into the hospital. I did it because it was the right thing to do. And before people judge me and say, you know what, there's no room for violence, there's no excuse for violence, bullshit. Okay? If that was your son and he was in jail for a DUI or for tickets, and someone's about to rape him or victimize him, what would you want me to do? Stand around and wait for something to happen? I didn't believe in running to the cops. I'm not going to do that. I also had to survive in prison. So I gave a lesson. And that lesson was that around me, that's not going to happen. I don't know what happened to that kid, but I know that that day he wasn't raped because I was there. And I'm always going to be there. Look, I'm not your likely good guy in most scenes, but you know what? I'm not allowing anybody to be raped. And that's my code. That's how I live. And if it takes the ultimate price of taking someone's life because they're doing it to somebody, it's going to happen. It's just the way it is.
And I don't know if many people can appreciate that of when we talk about violence and that violence is especially a part of prison life. And like you're saying, there is a code. My question about Rooster, what happened to him after he was stabbed? Is it kind of like, okay, you messed up, we gave you a punishment, and now you're good with, his own car, or is he ostracized from that point on?
Yeah, see, it wasn't that he was ostracized. His people didn't want to do that. They were instructed to do it or suffer the consequences, which at that time, to go up against the Southern Mexican car would have been the biggest mistake in the world because they would have all been had. Every one of them would have died. So they chose to, he screwed up.
Right.
Rooster knew the rules. You never cross a racial line because you know a war is going to erupt because of it. If you and well, your last name is Santana, so I'm thinking maybe you are Hispanic. So, you look Caucasian or white, and that's another thing in prison.
My dad's side is Dominican.
Okay, so you would be Hispanic. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you look like. There are Hispanics that are blonde hair and blue eyed, but he understood you don't cross those lines. Now, if I had a problem with another Hispanic, I can do what I do because I'm also a car member and I have a personal issue with this guy. But unfortunately for Rooster, he didn't believe when they told him, look, you're good. We had to do this because of that. You screwed up. You've paid your debt. Although it was true, they were going to accept him. The Mexican car had no problem with him. It was a means to an end. He was, a casualty, but he never came back outside because he felt they were trying to set him up. He got paranoid. Look, someone stabs you of your own car and you're thinking, what? And they're telling you, look, it's because you did this. Some people say, okay, great. They come back out and they're good. He didn't. He felt that he was in danger and they were going to kill him. And he unfortunately went to a protective custody yard.
So Richard gets stabbed in the yard. He eventually recovers.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he crapped into a bag for a while because they did a number on him. He went to the hospital, did whatever he did, and he came back, went back to his cell, never came out again. I mean, like I said, he never came out to yard. He went to church. He went to different events that he was isolated, but he never came back out to yard. And Richard Ramirez was scared. He was scared of the Hispanics and the Mexicans out there because they were trying to do one thing: coax them into coming back out so they can kill him.
Is there any other opportunity for him to be assaulted if he doesn't go out to the yard?
Sure,
Like, are you safe
absolutely.
if you don't go out to the yard?
Well, everywhere on death row, you have to go escorted anywhere, and you're cuffed behind your back. That is the perfect opportunity to get somebody. So there are a number of ways, and this happened on death row. I'm going to tell you the story because no one's ever heard this before. So on death row, each cell has a tray slot, and that's where they lower it. They cuff you behind your back, and then they open the door and they walk you out. Same thing as in the shop. That tray size is also there to give you your food because you eat inside your cell. You don't go to a chow hall in death row. Everybody's isolated unless you go to yard. On yard, they release you. Like, for example, I was on yard one at the time, which was an affiliated yard. And what I mean by affiliated, it means it's a gang yard. Those are the kind of yards in death row. Either you go to this yard or you go to protective custody. I always went to a normal yard. And let me say this again, I went to yard every day. There was no if and buts about it. Yeah, I'm sometimes that guy that people don't like. But you know what? You know what I told people? I'm not hard to find. You got an issue with me? Come outside. We'll deal with it. That is my quote of the day every time. I tell people, I'm not hard to find. If you got an issue with me, come deal with me. That's it. And at that time, there was weights on death row. And I'll send you some photographs so you can post them. I was a pretty intimidating looking guy. And I proved that with sheer violence when someone tried to harm me. Look, I didn't go out looking for fights or looking to harm people. But if someone came to take me, believe me, they got a handful with me. As I was saying, these tray slots are also used to lower and bring the phone to you. On death row, they have a phone that's on a cart and they would move it. I was the phone coordinator, so I would assign people to say, I gave you an hour on Tuesday at 8 o'clock at night. This one guy who had had issues with a guy 3 cells down, they couldn't get to each other because they were on separate yards. On death row, there was only one yard at one time. When they started victimizing people, they made another yard called yard 4. That was protective custody. Over the years, they developed yard 2, yard 3, yard 5, yard 6, yard 7. The reason they did this is because the sheer violence on death row. You'd have guys cannibalizing each other. So they had to separate them. Otherwise, they'd continue to kill each other. So in this instance, this guy couldn't get to the guy who's on yard 3. This is how he did it, though. So the guy's coming in from yard. He knows he goes to yard every day. They come in at 1 o'clock. So what does this guy do? He makes a cardboard sleeve, like a box, and it's exactly the size of the tray slot, minus maybe 1/20th of an inch on all sides. It's made out of cardboard, but with Elmer's glue. It is hard as a log. He makes it almost 6 feet long, and he makes it the size of the tray slot, and he has the phone right here. When they start running yard, he moves the phone to the side, exposing the tray slots. And he has this big, for lack of a better word, like a 4x4 that he could slide in and out of the tray slots like a large spear. He wraps it in plastic, like a paper plastic bag from the trash bag, and he greases it with hair grease. At the end of it, he sticks a 9-inch bone crusher this big at the end of it, made out of steel. And I'm talking about iron steel. He polishes it, he cleans it, puts blood lines on it so he can stab it. Because the body, when you stab somebody, the body naturally contracts around it. Very difficult to pull the knife out. These guys put blood lines so when you hit somebody, you can slide it out and hit them again and keep stabbing them. So what does this guy do? He sees the guy's coming from yard, and when the second guy goes, you can't be too close. They keep them separated. Here comes the guy that's walking. He slides the phone out. So the guy has to stop and come closer to the tray slot to get around the phone. When he does that, he looks into the cell and the guy runs and slides that thing and spears them through the chest or through the stomach and then pins them against the bars that's made to not be able to throw people off the tier. And he backs up like 4 inches and stabs them again and just keeps stabbing them that way. So you can get people if you want. It just depends on how much you want this guy. That guy wanted that guy for disrespect. And that's how he took care of him. He just stabbed him, kept stabbing him.
How much time do you think you had invested in making that?
Well, look, you can see, like I said, these are cubes that I made on death row. They're made out of cardboard, but they're hard as a rock. They're sculptures. I came up with all kinds of ways of making art, world-class art that galleries around the world sell. when you have nothing but time, but you're dedicated to what you're doing. I saw a guy with a pair of nail clippers cut out of a steel bunk an 11-inch bone crusher, sharpen it where he cut paper. And here's the craziest thing. Just think about this. And I won't mention the guy's name, but he is a made guy. So he gets a razor blade and he begins to cut the inside of his calf with the razor blade, and he makes an incision. Then he gets a plastic bag, and over a 2-month period, he begins to slide that plastic bag into his calf behind the muscle. Okay? He's bleeding everywhere, but he's doing this. When he forms a pocket there, because they usually put a wand, a detector on your chest, your mouth, your backside, your back, and your shoes. They don't run it past the metal detector, past your calves. And if they do, he had on a brace. They only have a brace on. They ask him to take it off. It has metal on it. Oh, okay. He walks by. What this guy did was, before yard, he slid a 9-inch bone crusher into his calf and then taped it so he couldn't bleed anymore. Because as you walk, the muscles contract, of course, it would begin to bleed. He put tape around it and put long socks up to his knees, and then he put on a plastic sleeve on his calf, so if he bled, you wouldn't see it coming through his double socks. And he walked through a metal detector. When it goes off, oh, it's my brace. Take it off. He unhooked it. He handed it to him. There's a metal brace. Oh, okay, good. They didn't bother to make him walk again. They figured that's where it came from. People get lazy. He walks outside, waits a few minutes, pulls it out, puts a handle on it, and then stabs the hell out of some guy.
That's what's so crazy is to think about that you're in a cell and you come up with the idea of cutting behind your calf and you're that dedicated where you're doing this multiple times and putting your own health at risk as well to shove a plastic bag under a muscle. That seems to be not sanitary, but you're that dedicated to stabbing someone, which just shows that I know you pointed out your art, and that is something that I've seen a lot of serial killers do as well, is they instead spend their time learning to paint. And you've been very successful at that. And for those that are listening that don't know, you were in Forbes magazine, and you also mentioned that you've written a book, and your art is legitimately sold. This isn't, some crappy drawing that you did while you're in your cell. So you've
Correct.
got, yeah, so you've got guys like you who are like, okay, I'm going to write a book. You've actually written 2 books now. Um, Through the Lens of Monster is your most recent book, which is just came out a few months ago. It's available on Amazon, Barnes& Noble, Kindle, and Audible. We did for those that have not heard, we've done another interview based on that book. But my point is that some people's minds go to, okay, what type of positive things can I do to keep my mind going, to stay sharp? And then others just have this complete dedication to continuing to kill people.
Well, I think that's a way to look at the perspective. The perspective in prison is that, for example, you're on death row. You're never getting out. They're going to
Right.
execute you, and your only way out is in a pine box. So we live in a society. It's the underbelly of your society, but it's a micro society with its own rules. In this society that I live in, or I lived in, it is about not only just surviving, but thriving in prison. And when you thrive because you know the rules of that prison society, it's no different than becoming a doctor. You earn respect in prison, but that respect is based on in house deeds. It doesn't matter what you did in the streets. It doesn't matter if you're a loan shark, a mafia member in the street. When you get in prison, you have to earn your bones. And what that means is You earn how to gain respect. And some guys dedicate themselves to gang life. And they consider themselves the elite of the convict world. They're respected. If they come to sit at a table, most people move. If the trade is drugs, loan sharking, extortion, all these things happen in prison, and that's what's respected. So when you see these mob guys in the streets and they're like, hey, they're knock around fellas. This is just what we do. In prison, it's the same way. You live in that society, and gambling, loan sharking, extortion, murder, assault are the tools of the trade. In my situation, I didn't want to be a guy who just drew pretty pictures. I needed to make a living because I was not going to ask wife, mom, dad, somebody to send me money. I was going to take care of Bill. And I said this many times, if Bill didn't take care of Bill, Bill didn't eat. So I wanted to become a contemporary artist, not some clown that was making pictures because he was on death row to selling for $50. My paintings have gone for 18, 20, $30,000 because of the process and because of my intent as an artist, not as some clown. Yeah, serial killers, Gacy, draw a little bit, little clown pictures, and he's making money off his crime. That wasn't my deal. And at some point, I wrote books. But at the same time that I was doing that, I was also earning the respect of the convict by being that guy that wore that mask in that yard probably better than anyone. Because in prison, you can't fake being tough because people are going to call you out. Either you are or you're not. And if you're not, hey, that's fine. But if, for me at least, maybe it's ego driven, maybe it's a bit of that. Look, I was very angry when they convicted me and they set me to death row. Um, it was my first offense, first felony conviction, one homicide, and I get it. That's a bad crime. But the reason I was placed there was a lie. They gave me a special circumstance.
Bill.
Yes, it cut off. Yeah, I don't know why that happened. Can you hear me? Okay. So let me try and. Okay, are you there now?
Yeah. Just I heard first felony conviction and how you're angry.
Let me try a
So
different
just taking
connection.
a note here. We'll edit these together. You
How's
there?
that?
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah. So I heard that you said that it was you're angry. It was your first felony conviction, and then that's when you cut off.
Okay.
Do you just
I'll
want to start
continue.
back off with, like I was angry, and then go into
Yes.
that? Okay.
Yeah. So I was very angry that I was convicted and placed on death row. It was my first felony conviction, first timer. I was 18 years old, and yet they put me on death row with all these guys that had 10, 15, 20 murders. And that doesn't mean they're serial killers. They were hitmen from the mafia. They were, bank robbers, whatever. But they were career criminals. I didn't feel that I was. There was a bit of anger because it was a lie that placed me on death row. I didn't kill for financial gain. And a judge, or several judges, ruled in my favor decades later. This is the reason that I'm out, is because they found that I was not guilty of that. And I was angry. So there was a bit of disdain in my soul. And I wanted to make sure that anybody that crossed me, they would pay a price. And I know that sounds Neanderthalish, but I've always said that I'm two sides of that coin. I'm an extremely well-read person who educated himself. I always say I have double PhDs from the University of San Quentin, and I graduated top of my class. In the same token, I'm very animalistic. I am primal. I am a Neanderthal. If someone tries to harm me, I will do everything I can in my power to make them pay the ultimate price. Because in prison, the most respected men are those who kill other convicts. and I was already on death row. And I made it very clear, if you try and harm me, I will put you in a grave. And that is the convict way of thinking. And I did that for 40 years on death row, and I survived it. Was it right? Probably not. But you know what? It's what I had to do to survive. And I'm glad for it. A lot of men that were there died on those yards, in those killing fields, because they didn't know how to wear a mask like I did. Wrong or
Yeah,
right, it is who I am.
right. And I mean, personally, I cannot blame you for the way that you lived and survived for 44 years. I think that you're absolutely right. This is a different society, and they play by their own rules. And the cause or the effect of breaking those rules is you lose your life, or you're raped, or you're extorted, or you have to learn to live that way. So, since you've left prison, how has that transition been from living by that code to normal, everyday life, making it as a podcaster and author?
Well, honestly, as I mentioned before, I never forgot the truth. My father used to always say this: lie to everybody else, never lie to yourself. Don't forget the truth. I never forgot the truth of who I really was. And it was that simple. So once I walked out of prison, I took that mask off. Is it a part of me? Absolutely. If I see someone being harmed on the streets, if I see someone trying to rape someone, I'm going to stop it. I don't care. I'm going to stop it. It's who I am. It's part of my code. But do I believe that violence is the only answer now? Absolutely not. There are ways of dealing with things in this society according to the rules of this society. And I live by those rules. And people always ask me, why do you fly a black flag with a blue line on your Harley Davidson? Because I am one of those persons that supports law enforcement. I believe, like most convicts do, in the rule of the law. And that is that if you don't have rules, you don't have laws, excuse me, you're living in complete chaos and anarchy. Nobody likes that. And the truth is, I have a sister, sisters, by the way. I have a mother. I don't want someone in this society harming them. So I believe in the letter of the law. I support law enforcement. And it's that simple.
Well, I certainly appreciate it, and especially your support for law enforcement and working with them on finding victims of serial killers. We went into that the last show that we had you on. Hopefully, we'll have you on for some more shows. I appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Love coming on your show. I love the show. And anytime you need me on, I'll come on. Always trying to do my service. And again, I appreciate your service as law enforcement. And I respect the flag that flies behind you.
Well, thank you for that. And please go out and get the book. It's Through the Lens of a Monster. It is a book about Bill's involvement with Joseph Naso, who is a known serial killer. Bill was able to develop a rapport with him to the point that Naso confesses to several murders that law enforcement did not know about, as well as get the details of the murders they did commit and help law enforcement locate the bodies of the victims, which they still haven't been able to do today. Make sure you check that out. Again, it's on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, Barnes Noble, anywhere where you can get a book. If you'd like to support me, you can get my book, A Murder on Campus, A Professor the Cop, and North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. You can also like and subscribe to YouTube, Apple, and Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcast. Bill, thank you again, and good night.
Thank you.